So NPR has been around for a long time. They have this thing across the country in buildings called radio stations. We don't listen to radio stations quite so much as we used to. I started in a radio station, and everybody listened to radio. I was chatting last night with the folks from Middlebury because I started that little radio station, and they're still there, and they're still doing it, but it's harder to get people. Now there are podcasts and everything else. And then there are organizations like Spotify. And Spotify, they don't have radio stations, but they have an incredible digital reach, and they have phenomenal resources. And Spotify says it has an inclusion mindset. And they say they prioritize growth through listening and learning. So we're going to hear about that now. And I'm happy to welcome Adriana Martinez-Smiley. She's a Planet Forward correspondent from Northwestern University, along with Kristin Jarrett. She's Spotify's equity and impact lead, and I welcome them to the stage, and you'll have an opportunity to hear them directly. So welcome. Have fun. Hi, thank you for coming.
Okay, thank you so much for that intro, Frank. And yeah, it was really great to see that video from Sadie. You know, something that really grabbed me in that conversation that she had with Eric is about representation and how much that matters for the audience. So one of the first questions that I want to ask is about, you know, I'm sure that there are like thousands of podcasts that center, you know, environment and climate. What do you do, like, in your role to sort of like, you know, I guess like identify those gaps that there are in terms of like the diversity of topics and within the creators on the platform?
Absolutely. So in my role at Spotify, I lead equity and impact. And so we're an umbrella organization that houses our social impact work, our climate action work, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and our early career pipeline work. So thinking about getting young people to come in and work for us, to tell stories with us. And representation is everything, right? We want to make sure that there are diverse voices who can tell stories, because when that's not happening, you're not getting an accurate depiction of what the world looks like, of how climate justice is affecting certain communities, right? Or whatever story it is that you're trying to tell. So that's really a big focus. That's why my job exists. And so there's a couple of ways that we do that. I think one of my favorite ways is that we have a program called Sound Up. And so welcome anyone to apply for this fantastic program. It exists in about 15 different markets. And so it really is supporting storytellers who have niche perspective, right? So it could be educators, it could be climate activists, right? To really follow them from ideation to launch of their new podcast to be on platform. Spotify has about 400 million unique listeners every month, not year, month. That's a huge responsibility. That's a huge platform, right? And so we can't take that lightly. And so there isn't a lot of data around audio, especially around podcasts, the way that there is music. And so we are launching a study before the end of the year, which we're really excited about. But it's really important that our hosts are diverse, that the writers are diverse, and I think even more importantly, the individuals in the room who are making decisions about what stories are told are diverse. So we can hear perspectives across the board.
Yeah. You know, I was kind of hearing a little bit in your answer about like how certain communities might be affected by climate and environment issues more than others. And, you know, I think sort of an emerging issue area within storytelling is environmental and climate justice.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you could sort of talk about like what role you see audio content playing in this movement.
I mean, so much, right? I feel like we've been having these conversations all day. So one, I think that audio storytelling and content is where you can get really valuable, accurate information. I think it's how you can call audiences and communities to action. And I think it's where you can tell compelling stories that maybe don't resonate in other ways. I think sometimes, you know, we think about, I mean, the literally climate crisis, right? It feels overwhelming. I think that there's still a lot of people who feels like, oh, that's that's going to be something that happens, decades and decades down the line, as if that isn't taking place right now. And so something that I love through some storytelling opportunities we have on platform, we have a podcast called 2072, and it's essentially from the perspective, it's research-based, sharing stories 50 years from now. What does the world look like? If I am a 30-something Black woman living in DC, what does my life look like in 50 years? So I think getting a chance to understand, what is coming down the pike, and then also what we could be doing now, and making sure that there's a call of action attached to that is incredibly important. So again, I think it's just being responsible with your platform, and I think getting young people really involved and engaged, right? Like, I am a millennial fighting for my life, like other millennials probably out there all the time, like have been fighting for my life forever, right? And so I think getting my parents to care, like older generations to care. So we are so dependent on the younger generation. Like, please tell your stories, show your activism through storytelling, get on platform. It's free. It's free for you to create. It's free for you to download and use, right? Put your story out there. So yeah, I know that was a longer answer, but please tell your story.
Yeah, and within that, realizing how important this access is for young people to have. I'm wondering if you can sort of talk about what resources do tend to be lacking for audio creators, and what you and your team at Spotify do to try to reconcile that.
Yeah, I think with a lot of creative industries and with audio storytelling, podcasting, streaming too, I think sometimes it's just a lack of information on how you access the industry, just like the same thing with, marketing or brand and creative, right? And so we are really trying to make sure that we're closing the gap to the industry and to create. So I think a couple of things that we do is our platform is still free. I think that, Daniel Ek, our CEO, his plan is that it will always be free to download and leverage. And we have a platform called Spotify for Podcasters, so download that when you have a second. And through the platform, you can record your content, you can edit it, you can put it on platform immediately. You don't need a fancy microphone, you don't need a fancy setup. If you have any type of smart device, your phone, your tablet, your computer, get into a closet so you have, some good soundproofing, and tell your story. It's all about storytelling. So I think for us, it's about removing the barrier of access and really democratizing the industry, because when you remove the barrier of access, then you really can collect stories that just really need to be told. So I think that's really important for us. And we specifically have a program called Next Gen, where we're connecting with young people and upskilling them in audio, so that way they're able to tell their stories and they're able to create content. I think part two that I'll share really quickly too is sometimes it is about identifying space, because sometimes you just want to be in connection and community with young creators. So we also have a program called Making Space, where we are dropping free audio equipment that's accessible by any community, and more underrepresented communities, small towns in South Carolina or Florida, right? Where it's maybe not as accessible as like a DC or a New York, where young creators can get together and work together. We have free training programs. So I think what I always try to say is your anxiety around creating content is a lie. You absolutely have something valuable to say, and you should be creating that content now, and we want to make it free and accessible for you to do that.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing to hear about the initiatives that you guys are doing and how you guys are trying to sort of drive diversity in audio content. So, within this work, in the future, what effects do you hope to see from uplifting young creators that are coming from marginalized communities?
I love this question. I think about this a lot, right? I think about, uplifting young people to tell stories. I think it will help to change the industry and what stories we think are valuable and should be told, right? And I think if anything, you should want to leave a record of your life here, your experience right now, the issues, what brought you joy. And I compare it a lot to, I've done my own audio recordings with a lot of my elders, some who are now, right, have moved on to being ancestors at this point, right? But collecting stories that were never reflected in the history books, never will be, stories I would have missed out on, really key parts of who I am and my identity. And I want you to be able to do that for those that come after you. Tell them about the struggles, that Earth is having right now, that maybe you're having right now, the joys that we're experiencing that could be gone in the next couple of years or decades. I don't mean to be so morbid, but it's rough out here, right? So kind of just making sure that you're leaving a public record, I think that's really important. And I think in general, right, on the other side, I think there's new genres and conversations that you all can bring to platform, that young people can bring to platform, right? Like enough of even hearing us talk, like millennials have been talking and complaining forever, right? So it's like we're just ready for new voices in general. And so I want to hear about, your perspective on politics, on climate, on mental health, on, growing up, your first job after college, which we were just talking about not that long ago. Tell us about, leave a record of your life here. I think that's just a really wonderful privilege to be able to do that. And I think it'll be helpful for future generations too.
Yeah. Now I think, well, thank you so much for, having this conversation with me here. So we actually wanted to move on to asking a question to the audience. I think we might only have time for one question, but yeah, can you?
Hi, my name is Zareen Reza. I'm environmental studies major from the University of Connecticut, and I was just wondering if you could tell us about some of the successes that you've seen from your programs.
Absolutely. So one of my favorite programs, shows that were launched through a program is called Dope Labs on Spotify. So it's essentially these two Black women scientists who are talking about how science has affected their life, genetics has affected their life, right? And so telling a story that you typically don't hear, that's led by two Black women, about how it shows up in our food and our history, and how the earth operates, right, and clothing. It's just been such an interesting experience, and I think just story that you typically don't hear, and I think that's what's really cool. Another one, I might get a chuckle out of this, but one of my favorite podcasts is called Black People Love Paramore, and the idea is there are some niche things culturally, right, that we just don't talk. I love Paramore, right, but there are just some niche things that we don't discuss and we don't talk about. So what are we missing out on? There's a podcast for everything, and I think that's more so what I want to focus on if it's sports, if it's mental health, right? There's probably something niche. I love Armchair Expert. So getting a chance, I think, to hear from, celebrities. I mean, not quote unquote, they are celebrities, right? But just kind of a different story, talking about their struggles, talking about some of their triumphs. So yeah, I mean, I think there's been a number of successes, even with some of our students. So I think seeing them enter the industry and them now working and saying, this is the story we need to tell, how do we do it? And seeing them really thrive. So it's been a joy to see. So yeah, I would say I have to plug, obviously, the platform that is where I work, and I love Spotify. But search for anything. Make it as random as you possibly can, and I guarantee you'll find content that aligns, and you'll find community in that, right? Because that's really what storytelling is. It's another way of building community. So just encourage you to check it out.
Okay, yeah. I think we might actually have time for one more question. Yeah. Okay, I see a hand. Okay, would you like to go?
I'm looking this way, so I'm seeing these hands, and you're looking this way. Yeah. Hi.
Hi, I'll stay seated for the purposes of time. Hi, so I'm actually really new to the EJ movement, and what got me interested was a switch I had in my career. And so something that we often are thinking about is what solutions have the privilege of being viewed as legitimate. Yeah. So what work do you think we could be doing specifically in the storytelling space and also in the content space to highlight historically Black solutions to the climate crisis that have not been given the privilege of being viewed as legitimate nor worthy of our attention and consideration?
Okay, fantastic question, and that's exactly the work that we're trying to do. So one, those are stories that we've already started highlighting on our platform, and I think what's important is to continue to tell those stories, right? So when you're talking about environmental justice, the experience of someone growing up in even this area, right? Like even if you're talking about DC, so those who are growing up east of the river and what their lived experience is like and how that's much different from if you're in Foggy Bottom, go and talk to them, right? You create your questions of, you know, what are some changes you've seen in the environment? What are some health issues that your grandparents had growing up that you just thought were, you know, caused for whatever reason, old age, but it was really because of their food. It was really because of, you know, pollution. It was really because of what was being dumped in the Anacostia River, and we never talk about it. So I think it really is about taking the opportunity to tell those stories, because otherwise, if you don't do it, then no one, I mean, I hate to be like, it has to be you, but it has to be you, right? Because who else will share that? And I think, you know, sharing it, on your social channels, with your networks, encouraging other people to do the same, even creating storytelling circles. Like, let's get together, a group of us, and we are going to identify an elder in the community and hear about how the environment has affected their health or, you know, their sense of well-being. So thank you for asking that question. And we are hosting, Spotify is hosting a workshop tomorrow. If you want to join us, we're doing a little mini Spotify Labs to tell you how to show you how to tell your story on platform if you want to come hang out with us in the morning. Well, thank you. I think. Thank you. This is great. Okay, I think you can.
Sustainability is existing, it's continuing, it's perseverance, it's thriving, it's loving, it's what Black people in the United States have done since we've gotten here. It's in my culture, it's in my fashion, right? Even when I put my carrots in my ears, I see that as a form of sustaining, right? To be able to express myself and to show up. This is how I sustain myself. It dawned on me one day, every time I looked at instances of discrimination, specifically in the United States, but also around the world, it was always something rooted in agriculture or something rooted in natural resources. And so as I started to be around my friends, everything we would talk about, I would be bringing agriculture up, right? Because I'm at Tuskegee, I'm learning about the legacy of George Washington Carver, Booker T. Washington, George Paris, these people who played such an influential and impactful role in the civil rights movement, who really shapes our world of rights today, right? Like the human rights conversation is really rooted a lot in civil rights as well. So being able to see all of this thread, I'm like, oh my God, agriculture is everything. It's everywhere. So for me, it became my form of activism. So everywhere I'm at, I'm talking about agriculture. I'm trying to plug people into Black farmers, Black produce, Black stories, Black land. And over time, my friends were just like, okay, plug, we get it. Like, you're the farm plug. And I was like, Kendall the farm plug. I'll take it. So storytelling is important to me because I believe that stories shape our universe, right? They give our reality context. And without stories, right, even when we think about the Bible, how a lot of stories of creation unfold, they begin with word. They begin with someone being in a place, experiencing something, and telling someone else about what they experienced. And that over and over again comes together to be all of our shared reality. And I think that it's super important that we all have the space to share reality and to share our own realities with each other.